Our systems activated around the end of August, beginning of September, and we were able to send cash to over 4,000 people 1 week to 2 weeks before the peak flood arrived to their villages, allowing them to build rafters to protect their most valuable assets, to evacuate their households, and reducing the impact of the floods in their communities.
This is the Digital Humanitarian, where we explore how technology is transforming crisis response.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Digital Humanitarian. Very cool episode that we have today. We have with us Federico Barreras from GiveDirectly, and today we want to talk about early prediction and AI, and specifically we want to talk about effective systems for crisis management. We're going to zoom into Nigeria floods in 2024 and hear from Federico about how they responded to those floods. So welcome, Federico.
Hi, Dana. Thanks for having me. Very happy to be here with you.
Likewise. So maybe first of all, let's set the scene. We're talking about 2024, and we're looking into massive floods, and it's a region that GiveDirectly actually already operates in. So maybe walk us through, the crisis itself.
Thanks, Dana. Allow me just to share a quick note about GiveDirectly for folks who might not know my organization. GiveDirectly is an international org that sends cash to people living in poverty or affected by shocks, no strings attached. So since the year 2009, we've been sending cash to people. And by now, we've sent about $1 billion to 1.9 million people across 12 different countries. Just for you to know, and for listeners, GiveDirectly is different to other organizations in the sense that we do not have several assistance modalities, but we just focus on cash. And we try to do it the best way we can. This project we implemented in Nigeria last year was an anticipatory action project, meaning that we tried to provide support to people in Nigeria for preparedness for floods, not a relief project. So the intention of it is try to support people be better prepared, reduce their negative coping strategies, allow those who want to evacuate, and support people to be ready before floods arrive to their houses. So in the year 2024, we had pre-positioned in Nigeria in the southern part of Kogi State, which is close to the Niger River, an area heavily affected by floods. The way we started using AI actually was when we pre-positioned. So instead of just doing some desk research and identifying areas at risk, we used Flood Hub data, which is data provided by Google Research, to identify the historically most affected areas in Kogi, which brought us to an LGA, a local government area called Ibaji. And we basically identified 6 wards within Ibaji where we started registering people months before the flood season. That meant that when floods arrived, we were already ready, we were prepared to send cash within 24 to 48 hours after our alerts triggered to people who were forecasted to be affected by them. Effectively, what happened was that our systems activated around the end of August, beginning of September, and we were able to send cash to over 4,000 people 1 week to 2 weeks before the peak flood arrived to their villages, allowing them to build rafters to protect their most valuable assets, to evacuate their households, and reducing the impact of the floods in their communities.
That's interesting. So effectively, you're saying you pre-position, meaning you were already in the country, in the region. You knew what's a flood-prone area. You had predictive technology to know and to anticipate when the floods might come, and then you pre-position the communities and the vulnerable people with cash ahead of time so they can prepare themselves.
Yes, Dana. Well, pre-positioning, first of all, in the sense of having people registered in our systems prior to the floods being forecasted for. Since we don't have a lot of time from the time systems activate until floods actually occur, usually we have a lead time of 5 to 7 days from triggers to actual floods arriving. We need to be ready, and our systems need to be in place when flood forecasting activates. So by pre-positioning, I mean pre-registering, pre-enrolling participants or recipients in our program prior to the flood season's commence.
Got it. So you have people basically on the ground and they know, the communities know that GiveDirectly is there and they register with you. And they know also, you guys know that there's a very high chance of floods because of Google Research and Google Flood Hub. And that's how you basically support those individuals.
Yes, exactly, Dana. So not only being present in the field, which is very important, but also having the capacity to enroll people remotely. We don't only use technology for forecasting, but we've also used technology to register people in our systems, saving in our program around $80,000 in registration activities. Usually in our projects, or historically in many humanitarian projects, people get registered in person, which is very time consuming and also resource consuming.
Right.
But in Nigeria, we used our technology with partners like Viamo and others to enroll people remotely through a USSD code that they can dial in their phones. A normal phone can use it. And first of all, allowing us to save funds, but also to make our project more efficient and being able to register a high number of people in a very short period of time compared to the long time that it takes to register thousands of people in a specific area if you do it in person. Everything is not done remotely, right? We always need to do some in-person verifications, although part of our verifications are done remotely. Some of them have to be done in person to make sure also that we are giving the money to the right people and using our funds in the best way possible.
It sounds like you have days, you mentioned you have days from when you have the prediction to where you actually have the event very likely occurring, and you have to register, in your case, 4,000 people, and you have to make it as efficient as possible and also as resource effective as possible. So we do see it a lot in the digital humanitarian, how technology really enables it. Let's dive into the technology because we're talking about predictive technology and AI, but what is it? When we're looking at Google Flood Hub, what actually is the system and the technology?
Well, Google Flood Hub is a flood forecasting system that was designed and produced by Google Research that allows forecasting of flooding, of river-based flooding with high accuracy and a good number of days ahead of the flood is coming. But more importantly, it's a system that gives us very high granularity. If you look at other available forecasting systems, which there's many such as GLOFAS and others that have been there for a long time. They are very good systems. They also have high accuracy, but there's an issue with granularity, which means that they usually forecast for very vast areas, which means that once they trigger, you still need to add another layer to target people at risk before you start delivering aid, unless you're happy with a very high risk of inclusion and exclusion errors, meaning people who are really not affected by the floods being part of your project, or people who were affected by your floods but are missing, not being part of your project. What Flood Hub gives us, thanks to AI, is a high level of granularity. So instead of, for example, forecasting at the LGA level in a country like Nigeria, Flood Hub allowed us to forecast at the community level, which was crucial for us. This is also great in a time where funding has been reduced internationally, and we need to make a very effective use of funds in our programs, especially for an organization like GiveDirectly, where we value effectiveness really highly, and we want to make sure that most of the funding we get becomes money in the hands of our recipients. Having access to such high quality and high accuracy systems at a granular level becomes very important.
Yeah, and I do want to mention, like most of the technologies that we talk about, Google Flood Hub is a completely free application. You can just go online and Google it, and you'll see, the different regions of the world around river basins. And, like you're saying, it's super granular, so you can really take it into actionable kind of activities afterwards. And we did integrate, if I'm looking at Monday, we did integrate Google Flood Hub for some of our partners to actually create the predictive system into really an early warning system. And it's a great, great tool. We love Google Flood Hub. It's such an effective tool and it's really, really accurate. It really has the potential to be very accurate and to help you, take the early maybe warning, or early prediction to real early action and save people in turn. And I want to ask you, why do you think this is not something that every organization use, that's not more kind of spread out in our humanitarian space?
That's a very good question, Dana. And I think it's a very complicated context, the context of anticipatory action. First of all, although there are many studies that are already proving the effectiveness and the accuracy of anticipatory action programming, there is still more research to be done and more evidence to be generated. At GiveDirectly, we're an organization heavily sort of evidence-based. And this is one of the reasons why we started to work with anticipatory action programming. When we learned through other people's research that cash delivered ahead of disasters or ahead of hazards, let's say, reduces negative coping strategies, improves food security, health, it has very good economic outcomes, and in a nutshell, it makes communities better prepared to shocks and more resilient. This is still something that needs to be proven more at a global scale. And donors need to catch this, right? There have been a lot of efforts done by the Anticipation Hub, which is a community of a lot of anticipatory action practitioners that is bringing a lot of awareness to the donor community and to the humanitarian community, but there's still a lot to be done. On top of that, some of the systems like Google Flood Hub, and there might be others around, might not be known by everyone, right? So it is great for me to have this opportunity to share with you and others what our experience has been, because we think that such open source systems and such open source technology can be used by many others who are working on anticipatory action who might not be investing that much because of, lack of trust in their current systems. It's a mixture of different reasons why anticipatory action is not the default in every, let's say, disaster-prone area. Another angle is that not every disaster, not every hazard is as predictable as flood, like river-based floods are. Right. Or, for example, droughts, I'll talk about droughts a bit later, but it's one of the things that we want to adjust to and that we want to start also piloting anticipatory action for. But there are other hazards like, flash floods and cyclones that are not really so easy to anticipate for. AI is bringing a lot of new, let's say, hopes to this, but there's still a lot to do.
100%. And I think there's, like you're saying, there's so many other disasters that are not as predictable, even earthquakes or wildfires. But even that, I think, if we're looking at AI, I see so many new technologies kind of coming up and using predictive models to anticipate this. And I know that, for a lot of donors, maybe, and a lot of organizations, giving cash sounds like, to them, counterintuitive. But from my experience, and I know for a fact from your experience as well, it's so effective, and it really, really gives people back the agency and the power. They know what to do. They know how to prepare. They just need a little bit of resources, to help them get on board.
And dignity, Dana, honestly.
Right.
Allowing people to decide what they do with their cash is the best thing we can do. And after, obviously, in every project we implement, we have research or we have monitoring associated to it, and we see how people are using cash. In the case of Nigeria, for example, over 75% of people who we delivered cash to used it to protect their most valuable assets. They built, as I was saying before, bamboo rafters. They protected their livestock, their most valuable belongings. They also used cash to evacuate their homes before flooding arrived. And they used cash to protect their houses for what was coming, right? They even saved some money for the aftermath. So we also saw expenditure on food, essential items, and other things. And the impact was incredible. 93% of respondents from our monitoring survey said that they had recovered from the flood. Weekly income increased by 122%. People who were skipping meals when we did a baseline study were 97% of our potential recipients. On the end line study, this was reduced to only 7%, which is telling us that people are being protected and people are using the cash to protect their families, unlike some of the thoughts that people might have, that people might be, using the cash in ways that are not useful for them. The use of cash in GiveDirectly, we're not building a lot of evidence for anymore because evidence is there already. There's a lot of studies. There are thousands of studies about the use of cash. Actually, it's crazy the high number of studies around the use of cash compared to the use of, other types of assistance that humanitarian actors delivers. I think here the question is more, how do we ensure that we're sending cash to people who will actually be affected by these floods or these different hazards? And AI is helping us making sure that the accuracy is higher. And I think, I hope that in a couple of years, most of the disasters will actually not occur because hazards can be forecasted for and because people can be protected against these hazards. So we think, first of all, that these forecasting systems and this AI fuel technology that's arising will help from one hand, but also we think that cash is going to become default assistance modality for these programming. It has been shown already how people using cash, makes them better prepared and has great outcomes. So we're also advocating at GiveDirectly for the use of cash in anticipatory action and humanitarian programming.
I think you're touching on two really important, let's say, misconceptions. The first one is people always look at, or not always, but especially people not from the space of humanitarian aid, they look at natural disasters. Natural disasters do not exist. We have natural events, we have weather events, and they become a disaster only when people are really in the middle of it and not prepared, and there's no real mitigation. And coming with anticipatory action, understanding who are the vulnerable potential populations and enabling them, giving them, again, agency, capacity, and the ability to prepare really avoids the disaster. A huge misconception. And the second one, when we talked about it, donors or generally people, they feel like people, they need stuff, let's give them tarps and let's give them water and food, but they don't need that per se. They need the agency to decide what to do and what fits their specific situation. And every specific situation is different. There's no one size fits all, and cash really allows that. And it's beautiful about, the way you guys operate.
Totally, Dana. I think you've touched two very important issues. Well, I totally agree in the fact that people have a misconception around, disasters, right? When we talk about a disaster, we're talking about the impact of a hazard. But if we're able to anticipate that, we definitely can make a potential disaster become an event that people, were able to prepare for. And we can see the example of countries who have been affected by disasters for many years and who have the means to prepare for them, such as Japan. We can see much less potentially destructive hazards becoming a disaster in countries that are not well protected. You made a very, very important point, and I hope that, listeners can reflect upon this a little bit after the podcast and think about, the last disasters that they've seen. Myanmar, for example, Turkey. What if people had known about this before and have had the means to evacuate their houses, protect their most valuable assets, and so on? Secondly, you were talking about the use of cash, and we like in GiveDirectly to talk about the use of cash as default. Obviously, this is context dependent, but most of the contexts in the humanitarian world allow for cash to be used. You just need a market to be in place. And in most of the crises, there is a market. And if there's not, then obviously cash has to wait until the market is active. But when we are forecasting, we're predicting potential hazards, markets are usually not yet affected. So this is a particular context in which cash is almost always the best way to go for anticipatory action purposes, to support preparedness, to increase resilience. We're going to be working in areas that have not yet been affected by a hazard, where markets are functional, and we tend to only think about people who are affected or the most affected or affected directly. But usually when a hazard hits a zone or when an area is affected by a humanitarian crisis, everyone is part of it. And if you're just sending stuff which you're buying elsewhere to a place, you're not really investing in that place. You're not supporting the entire community, the market. You are obviously helping, but probably that's not the most efficient. We've been talking about efficiency quite a bit. Probably it's not the most efficient way to help. It's great to see the effect of cash, not only in recipients, but in communities where we work. At GiveDirectly, we've been working a lot on doing randomized control trials to really identify how cash is affecting people's lives, but also communities as a whole. And we have seen clearly how cash being sent to specific areas not only help people who are receiving the cash, but also people who have small businesses will live around those areas. And ultimately, it helps boost the entire economy, making the area, let's say, more resilient and also helping folks escape or graduate from poverty, which we like to say. It's very interesting to see a context like anticipatory action, where most of the time your markets will be active, will be working. Then something can happen, after the event, then markets can be disrupted. Then you might think about other types of activities right afterwards. But once markets are back in place, if they're ever stopped, then again, cash is the way to go.
I want to talk about a little bit, looking into the future. So I think we've established the importance of cash and more so the importance of technology and utilizing it to save on resources, to make effective decisions and to make efficient maneuvering through these situations. But let's look ahead, let's look into the future and envision, where you see this going. If we're looking at the technology, we're looking into AI, we're looking into anticipatory action. Where do you see this moving forward when we look into what's to come?
I have no clue what's coming, but I can tell you what I think that AI, especially, and the changes that are arising in the moment, might bring into the space of humanitarian work. We're seeing how systems like early warning systems and systems that are forecasting for events are evolving pretty quickly. There's huge potential for us to have much more knowledge, not only about what's coming, but also once an event unfolds, where are the people most affected? Which areas are experiencing more acute impact from events and so on. My prediction / hope is that in the future, these systems, first of all, become a little bit more accurate because they're already very accurate, but become knowledgeable by the entire community. So we need to invest a little bit in getting out to platforms, sharing what's happening, advocating towards the use of these systems. I think the Anticipation Hub, as I mentioned earlier, is doing a great job. And during the last humanitarian network sort of week in Geneva, there was a lot of talk around anticipatory action, the potential and everything. What I think is that AI is going to bring a lot of tools for us to use. The context might change. Hazards will continue to happen, but our ability to forecast and to be ready or to make people ready before hazards come is going to increase. So I think it's a matter of, people taking, or especially donor communities, taking a bit of a small risk, actually, to start investing in such anticipatory activities, to see firsthand and to prove that assistance in people's hands before events unfold not only helps them prepare everything that we were saying, but also saves a lot of money in the aftermath of an event. There's already research done by the World Food Programme and others about how much money can we save if we invest in anticipatory action versus post-hazard or post-disaster assistance. And there's research showing that up to $7 can be saved for every dollar we invest in anticipatory action work. So what I think is, in the future, this will become more evident and people will see how effective anticipatory action is. Definitely a buzzword for me. Very, very difficult word to say, sorry. But anticipatory action can really save a lot of money in post-relief or in relief projects.
I think it's exactly what you're saying. It's, we used to have, like, the humanitarian space, such a strange mindset that, our role is to come in the disaster and maybe try and save the day and help communities in that time. But actually the most impact that we can really give is ahead of time. That allows them to really get prepared and not experience the disaster, but it also saves money. It's just like a better resource allocation. And you were also talking a little bit before about droughts. Can you tell me a little bit about this as well?
Well, droughts are a hazard that affect millions of people around the world, especially in Africa, which is a continent where GiveDirectly is mostly present. And we have been working with Google Research on identifying ways to prepare, to anticipate the droughts with also their systems. Google Research has been working on a similar system to the Flood Hub, but for droughts. And we are hoping to start using these systems in some of the countries where we are present. Our first pilot is going to happen in Kenya in the next 1 to 2 years, where we will try to pre-position in some of the ASAL counties, the most arid countries of the country, to be able to send cash to people before they are affected by droughts. Hopefully this will help them, prepare better, protect their assets, and also invest on potential income generating activities that can help them, be more resilient to the coming droughts. We think that this might become a system and a type of assistance that we can definitely replicate and escalate. Drought early warning systems are accurate, but more important, they give much more lead time than floods. So instead of having 5 to 7 days to give cash to people, we will have 3 to 6 months, which gives us, a lot of time to make sure that we're putting cash into the people's hands in a time that allows them to prepare for what's coming, and also sharing the proper early warning messages that we usually do. Imagine that you're going to the doctor and you're being told that, in the next year, you're going to have a tough disease. But they tell you, however, if you take this medicine, you can avoid having this disease. Let's say you might experience, a little bit of unwellness, but you will not have the actual disease. I think that anticipatory action is sort of this doctor that is telling you that something is coming, something hard. It can potentially become this tough disease that you don't want to have, but there's things that you can do ahead. There are medicines that you can take to protect your body from that disease, right? And obviously, it's an analogy, but I think people can probably relate to this. If we know that, heavy rains are coming and this river might overflow with water, the Niger River, for instance, as we saw in Nigeria last year. But if we send this cash to people, they're going to use it in a way that's going to protect their lives. Second, it's going to protect their livelihoods. And third, it's going to make them better prepared for future potential flooding. I think it's a no-brainer. I think investment into anticipatory action is a matter of time, and people are already investing more money than before into it. And by people, I mean people, not only donors, but also governments and private donors that are supporting humanitarian operations. And I think that, as we were saying, AI is sort of making this doctor a much better doctor, right? It's making this AA doctor someone who has 10 degrees and who can tell you exactly what's coming, when it's coming, and then you can choose your medicine. What we say at GiveDirectly is, obviously, cash is best, but there are many other ways to support in anticipatory action programming. And obviously, early warning alerts are very important. So with every project we run, we also send out early warning messages to folks who are going to be affected by events. And I think this is a way to sort of better understand what anticipatory action is in a practical sense.
It's a great analogy. I like it. It's basically you're saying, listen, technology, it's like your doctor. Like if you use the technology appropriately, especially when it's strengthened with AI and its capabilities, this is really the best kind of doctor you can have to get you ready.
And you were also talking about, what's the future? I sort of tried to elaborate a bit about what I was hoping for a future within the community and in a wide sense. But I also want to share really quickly what the future is for GiveDirectly in this particular line of action. GiveDirectly is looking into expanding our anticipatory action programs to cover more hazards. As I was saying, we're going to be covering drought soon. We will keep covering floods in the coming years, but we also want to try to bring in more evidence to the field. We also try to show how people are using anticipatory action cash to protect their assets, to become more resilient. And we want to make a comparison versus, people who are not receiving that kind of assistance to really show the potential of sending cash to people ahead of events like floods, droughts, and different hazardous events. So that is one thing. I think we need to be advocating towards, the use of this kind of assistance. We're trying to look at paths to escalation, right? We've seen this in pilot programs, but we're also trying to work with governments to support them use these technologies in their own systems. There are many shock responsive social protection programs that are arising in many countries to protect people who are most at risk to these type of hazards. So we also hope that in the future, governments in countries that are heavily affected by hazards have access to this technology and can use it to protect their citizens.
If I kind of try to recap a little bit for the listeners what we've been talking about, I think, especially, for those listeners that come from the space and from the humanitarian space, first of all, use technology. I mean, the technology is there, it's open source, it's free, it's easy. Find it, use it. Even if we're looking just in this episode at Google Flood Hub, it's such a great tool. Second, I think it's around really building agency and enabling people and giving them back capacity and the dignity to decide on their own how it's best for them to prepare, because they know best at the end of the day. And also we're looking into the future and looking into disasters as a whole and humanitarian crisis, and how through this great tool of anticipatory awareness and anticipatory action and early warning systems, we can really avert a lot of the disasters and a lot of the both impact to people and resource allocation. So Federico, thank you very, very, very much. It was really, really an interesting conversation. And I really hope that we can make together a lot of impact and kind of spread the word out to all the other 8 organizations out there that are doing the amazing work, but need a little bit of a technological push as well.
Thank you, Dana. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in the podcast. Wishing you the best. I think it's great to have such a space to share, practices among the humanitarian space. And I do hope that others, as you mentioned, start considering more and more the use of technology to make their programs more effective, more efficient. Please feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to share more.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Federico.
Disasters are often unpredictable, but response efforts don't have to be. If you're a part of an aid organization, having the right digital tools can mean the difference between chaos and coordinated action. If you need practical tools for your organization's disaster management, visit mondayert.org. And if you enjoyed this, please share it with one colleague or friend who'd find it useful.